Good morning, everyone. I'm Maddie from TTG, and welcome to our Selling Sydney and Melbourne masterclass. I'm joined today by Ali from Tourism Australia, Siobhan from Destination New South Wales, Claire Golding from Visit Victoria. You may have seen last week's session, which was an introduction to Australia. So this is the second in a series of Australia-focused Facebook Lives, and there are two more to come, one next Wednesday and another the Wednesday after. These kind of sessions are aimed at giving agents the opportunity to train up on destinations during the current lockdown that we are all in. So today we're going to be focusing on some of the key highlights of Sydney and Melbourne, the kind of surrounding areas of those cities and day trips that clients can take while they're visiting. We're also going to look at some of the key events that happen in the cities throughout the year and a touring route that runs between Sydney and Melbourne and kind of the best way to sell that. We're also going to be sharing some agent support and resources that these three organisations are offering to you at this time. So first, I'm going to come to the key highlights. Sydney and Melbourne are obviously two of the main gateways to Australia and two of the most popular cities that UK travellers like to visit. So kind of coming to you first, Siobhan, what are the key highlights in Sydney?
Yeah, thanks, Maddie, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So Sydney is obviously fortunate in that it's home to two of Australia's most famous icons, so that is being the Sydney Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So for those sort of particularly first-time visitors to Sydney and Australia, we'd really recommend getting them into the heart of the city right from the start. So starting at the Sydney Opera House, you can of course experience a fantastic performance or show within the Sydney Opera House, and it's not just about the opera. There is a variety of things on offer there, from ballet to rock concerts to comedy. So there is probably something to suit every customer that wants to enjoy a performance within the Opera House itself. For those that don't want to see a performance, then you can obviously do a guided tour of the building. There's an hour-long tour that runs every day, and it's a good way to get an insight or an introduction into the architecture and the history of the building. And then there's also just the opportunity just to sit outside at the opera bar and grab a beer or a cocktail and just enjoy the views over Sydney Harbour. So there are a variety of ways that you can really get up close to this amazing icon. And then, of course, the second one, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, would really recommend climbing to the top of the bridge itself with bridge climb. You can do this climb at a variety of times during the day, from sunset to sunrise to sunset. But either way, whenever you do it, you'll get those picture postcard views of the harbour. But for those that don't have the budget or the time to climb, then there is also the Pylon Lookout, which you can recommend, and you can also find details about on the Bridge Climb website. So it's just a different way to experience the bridge. And of course, you want to get out on the water. Sydney is famous for its beautiful harbour and being in such close proximity to the ocean. So you can get on a boat tour of the harbour from Circular Quay or Darling Harbour. Captain Cook is one of the most popular operators that runs cruises of the harbour, but you can also opt for a smaller boat tour, such as one with Sydney Harbour Boat Tours, if there's customers that are looking for something a little bit different as well.
Okay, cool. And what about the beaches? Because I know Sydney's beaches are, often, shouted about in the UK because they're so popular. So what would you have to say about those?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously Australia itself is very famous for its beach lifestyle, and Bondi Beach is probably the most famous of those beaches in Sydney. So yeah, undoubtedly recommend a visit to Bondi. You can just lay and sunbathe on the sand, or of course it's a great place to soak up some cafe culture as well. And it's also one of the best places to learn to surf. And there's a great coastal walk that runs between Bondi and Coogee Beach. That's about 6 kilometres, and it's a great way to explore some of the ocean pools in the area, or even some of the smaller beaches as well along that route. And there's also a newly opened walking track between Bondi and Manly Beach, which is another one of Sydney's most famous beaches. The walking track itself is about 80 kilometres long, so you don't have to do it all in one go, but definitely one that you can break up into smaller chunks, and it runs past the harbour foreshore itself, round past the Sydney Opera House as well. So a great way for people to experience the city on foot.
Okay, cool. And Claire, what are some of the highlights in Melbourne?
Well, I'd probably say as a point of difference, one of Melbourne's key attractions really are the bustling and really creative little laneways. There's always something new to discover in Melbourne. It could be a unique little boutique, the coolest new restaurant, a covert sort of hole in the wall bar or cafe or little gallery. So we really recommend that customers give the sort of the main streets in the city a miss and go exploring down our little laneways. The outdoor art, our street art, is absolutely incredible. It's well known now around the world, and you really will. You can just go down little alleyways and discover amazing art installations. And you'll also find lots of light boxes and sculptures and things that point to some of the unique little restaurants and cafes that you might not even know exist. So it's a great way to explore. And probably two of the key lanes that I would suggest you give to your customers would be Flinders Lane or Hosier Lane. That's a great starting point.
Okay, cool. And then what about food and wine? Is that a big thing in Melbourne?
Well, food and wine is synonymous, I think, with Australia, and Melbourne is absolutely no different. We are obsessed with our food and wine, and of course our coffee. We do like to boast more cafes and restaurants than per capita than any other city in the world, which is probably true, and it's quite an eclectic mix. Victoria itself is actually one of Australia's food bowls, and we're very lucky that we have great farm gate to plate produce right on our doorstep. Restaurant tips, I would probably suggest that a couple of our top restaurants, one I would say Vue de Monde, that you can find about 50 floors up above the city, so great views and amazing food. Another restaurant, Attica, well known, it's in the world's 100 top restaurants and voted now for several years running in the top 100. But you can also just try some of the local little places such as Hutong in Chinatown, or just any of the cafes, and really experience food and wine like a local. You know, have breakfast sitting out in one of the laneways, get your fix of espresso, or just experience some of the rooftop bars, chat to the bartenders, get an amazing cocktail, or of course one of our amazing local wines.
Wow, sounds great. I'd like to be there now. And so what is the best way to get around Melbourne for people that are visiting?
Yeah, well, Melbourne is really easy to get around. It's comparatively compact. We have an amazingly good tram system, so you can get it easily around the city centre, and actually you can hop on and hop off, and that's actually free. Mm-hmm. But you can also get out to our precincts, so down to Bayside or some of the more quirky precincts such as Fitzroy. But I think one of the best ways and best for customers actually when they first come into Melbourne is to maybe put them on a walking tour. And we highly recommend someone like Hidden Secrets Tours or Walk Melbourne. And that's a great way for customers to get their bearings of the city and look at where they perhaps might want to explore themselves later. Another great attraction would be the Royal Botanic Gardens, and that's a lovely place to get a bit of a cultural fix and our local Aboriginal heritage in the Kulin community. So I would definitely recommend doing the Aboriginal Heritage Walk. And I think lastly, my other big pick would be to take a hot air balloon ride over the city. And Melbourne is one of the very few cities in the world where you can actually take a hot air balloon right over the top of the city. So great experience.
Wow, sounds fantastic. Now, I know agents are doing a lot of virtual tours and virtual FAMs at the moment. That's kind of a big thing now while agents are at home. Alison, are there any kind of tools that Australia is offering agents like that at the moment?
Yeah, a few of those key highlights that Claire and Siobhan have chatted about. Actually, you can do virtual tours online and really kind of experience them. If you visit australia.com, which is our consumer website, we've got a list of some great virtual tours, that you can take in. Some of them that I'll mention are the National Gallery of Victoria, where you can do a virtual curator-led tour, and see some of the amazing artwork that's there. You can do private tours through the Melbourne Museum as well, at a variety of different exhibitions as well. And you can do a sneak peek into the Sydney Opera House. They have a 360-degree tour there. You can see the opera bar there. You've got views of the bridge, and you can even go into the opera house itself and see what it's like inside. And then a couple other ones. So there's a few virtual walkthroughs and live streams of Taronga Zoo and also Zoos Victoria as well. So they might be a good one if any of the agents, have some kids at home or something. You can actually tap in and see what the animals are doing at that time, whether they're just sleeping or feeding. So that's quite a good one as well. So check those virtual tours out on australia.com. Yeah.
Oh, sound like fun. Sound like fun. So kind of now moving on to the events side of things. Events are obviously a great addition to clients' itineraries. And I know Sydney and Melbourne have some great events scheduled throughout the year. But which events should agents really be taking note of, and what type of clients should they be recommending them to? Siobhan, would you like to start with Sydney?
Yeah, so just for the purposes of this session, just sort of wanted to highlight that obviously under the current circumstances, we'd really recommend any agent that's looking to incorporate an event into a client's itinerary to check with the event website or with their social media channels, just to check on the status of the event and whether it's currently running within 2020, that's for sure. So we'll just talk about some of the annual events that do take place every year. Those being, of course, something like Sydney New Year's Eve. It's on a lot of people's wish list for a visit to Australia, and certainly would recommend including it for those that want to experience it. And perhaps a key tip for those who aren't sure how to get people the best views of the fireworks themselves, I'd definitely recommend looking into some of the boat touring options, because you can actually be on a boat in the harbour as the fireworks are going off at midnight. So it's a great way to be able to get some of the best seats in the house, if you like. But of course, aside from that, there's things going on all throughout the year in Sydney. One of our other major festivals is Vivid Sydney. It's the largest festival of light, music and ideas in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's a fantastic event for families. There's a lot of it that's free. It involves a lot of installations, light installations and interactive sort of exhibitions all throughout the city. So you can sort of walk through the city and experience that in a variety of ways. Includes those big projections that we see often on the Sydney Opera House, and much more besides as well, including sort of musical events and creative ideas, talks and things like that. We've also got Hand at Opera on Sydney Harbour. That's where they build a floating stage out into the harbour, and guests can basically sit on Mrs Macquarie's Point, which is sort of on the edge of the Royal Botanic Garden in Sydney, and watch the opera outdoors. That takes place in March and April each year. And of course, we, alongside Melbourne, as Sydney, play host to some of the major cricketing events throughout the year, which are of course very popular with Brits. Those being the upcoming T20 Men's World Cup, which is currently scheduled for October. We hope that will take place. And then, of course, looking ahead to next year, we have the Ashes series as well. So, yeah, I guess I just hand over to Claire to perhaps elaborate on some of our great sporting events that our cities both host as well.
Yeah, Claire, would you like to share some of Melbourne's key events?
Well, Melbourne loves an event. It really doesn't matter whether it's a big sporting event, as Shiv has mentioned, or cultural events, music festivals, absolutely whatever. I guess the key ones for our agents would be the Boxing Day test every year to start off that cricket feast, but the Australian Open, which runs every year at the end of January, and the Formula One Grand Prix in March are probably the major events that the Brits would travel to. I guess what also makes it a little bit different in Melbourne, our sporting precinct, which includes the iconic Melbourne Cricket Ground, but also arenas like the Rod Laver Arena for the tennis, etc. All of these areas are really close to the city. So the beauty of it is it's literally 10 to 15 minutes walk back into the city. And what it does mean that I think what makes Melbourne special for events is that the city is always buzzing and comes alive. Whatever you're following, your sporting heroes, your music heroes, there's always a buzz in the city. Great to get back into the city for a drink afterwards. I think the other key one, I think in terms of for our clients, the Australian Open in particular is great for all ages. It doesn't matter whether you're specifically following the tennis, because what they're brilliant at is lots of pop-up restaurants, pop-up bars and pop-up music festivals all around the tennis itself. So it really feels a festival atmosphere, and I'd highly recommend including that in any itineraries over that January period. And I think as well for the cultural buffs, the Food and Wine Festival, Melbourne's Food and Wine Festival in April each year, or perhaps if comedy is your thing, the International Melbourne Comedy Festival, which runs in April. They're probably the big ones.
Okay, great. So kind of moving on to the surrounding areas and regions of Sydney and Melbourne. Are there any kind of examples of day trips that visitors could do? Siobhan, do you want to start with Sydney?
Yeah, so I guess a great thing that both Sydney and Melbourne have is really the proximity of a diverse range of experiences that are both on the doorstep. So, you know, within a couple of hours, you can be into very different sort of landscapes and experiencing very different types of things, be it wine regions or mountainous areas, national parks, more beaches and coastal experiences as well. So there's real variety there on offer. And I suppose two kind of key highlights that I'd recommend, particularly for those, again, that are sort of first timers to Australia. You could go to the Hunter Valley, which is Australia's oldest wine region. It's a couple of hours away from Sydney, and it really has a fantastic array of cellar doors, over 150 of them that people can explore and taste some of the local wines there. There's some great award-winning restaurants in the region. It's got some fantastic produce as well. And there's always sort of new things opening there, such as recently Broken Wood Wines have opened up a new tasting centre, and it's got a great little restaurant there as well. So that's a good one for people to add to the list. And then, of course, there's the Blue Mountains National Park, which is only around 90 minutes drive away from Sydney. This is where you get to see the iconic Three Sisters rock formation, which you can see from Echo Point in Katoomba. You can also experience it with attractions such as Scenic World. And it's also, of course, a fantastic, huge national park where you can really get into the Australian bushland with a hike or a guided tour. And both of these areas are accessible in a day, either by car or by train, or also by guided tour. But of course, we'd always recommend spending an overnight trip there as well, just to really make the most out of it. It's a great way, for example, to avoid the crowds in Katoomba if you want to go to the Blue Mountains. If you're doing an overnight tour, then you can really get down to some of those famous spots first thing in the morning before some of the day trips arrive. So that's a good little tip for those agents that are selling that region.
Cool. Yeah, it's great that you know, the wilderness is so easily accessible. It's brilliant. Yeah. And Claire, what about Melbourne? What day trips are available from you know, your city?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Maddie. There is so much that's really accessible, literally on the doorstep of our cities. And so from a Melbourne perspective, in less than an hour, actually, you can be out in the Yarra Valley, enjoying all the little boutique wineries, great food and wine. But also, if you're on a day trip, you can get your wildlife fix as well with a visit to the famous Healesville Sanctuary. And that also boasts an amazing animal hospital there. It's really well worth a visit. Just southeast of the city, down on the Mornington Peninsula, that's another stunningly beautiful area because obviously you've got the coast on both sides effectively. So some great beaches, amazing golf. It's also home to the Peninsula Hot Springs, which is one of Australia's, well, it is Australia's only natural thermal hot springs. So that's great for a bit of relaxation after a round of golf or a big day on the beach. A little bit further on, just 90 minutes from the city, you've got Phillip Island, and that's probably the most iconic of our wildlife. So the daily penguin parade that comes in at dusk every evening, really worth watching. And I would also recommend, from our clients' perspective, you know, trying to put those customers onto the underground viewing. That's an amazing experience where there's been a new area built where you can literally be the people in the zoo. The penguins literally walk past your eyes. You're in eye line of these penguins. It's a great experience. And then if you go west of the city, there's another tour product called Echidna Walkabout, and they do beautiful wildlife tours, particularly for the kangaroos and koalas. They do a sunset tour every day, and that's perfect to be combined with a day tour in Melbourne, such as a Hidden Secrets tour, to get your culture fix in the morning around the laneways and then get your wildlife fix in the evening. Or of course you can do a day tour out onto the Great Ocean Road, but I would highly recommend that you put customers at least 1 or 2 nights on the Great Ocean Road.
Okay, cool. So now we've got a good picture of Sydney, Melbourne as cities and their highlights. What about clients that want to travel between the two? I mean, what is the best way to travel between the two? I mean, Ali, do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is like, obviously it's super easy to fly between the two cities. It's only about a 90-minute flight between Sydney and Melbourne. But I think driving is such a good way to really like experience the outdoors, the stunning scenery. There's so much wildlife and there's so many, you know, incredible, I guess, small towns. You know, you get to meet some Australian locals, so you know they're friendly and welcoming characters that you meet along the way. So I think driving is a really great way to take in that, you know, mix of diversity and those, you know, really colourful towns that you'll see along the way, which I don't know, passing on to these guys. Claire, did you want to chat about maybe if you're starting in Melbourne and driving north, what to expect?
Sure. Well, of course, I mean, the great beauty of the route is you can do it in either direction. But if you are leaving from Melbourne, probably the three key highlights that I would mention would be a stop in Phillip Island, a stop on Wilson's Prom, and another stop and an overnight at Lakes Entrance. I think on Phillip Island, I'd highly recommend to our agents here that you try and sell the 4 or 5 park pass. And that gives customers a great opportunity on the island to experience more than just the penguin parade. It takes in the heritage farm of Churchill Island. It also takes the eco boat tour right out to Seal Rocks, where there's one of the largest colonies of Australian fur seals, about 32,000 of them. It also takes in the Antarctic experience. So, as well as the koala reserve, actually. So 5 great products for our visitors. Further along, if you drive to Wilson's Prom, that's probably one of our hidden secrets. It's the southernmost promontory of mainland Australia. It's a massive national park. It's absolutely beautiful for nature and getaways. You can walk around labyrinths, literally, of little walking tracks. Amazing beaches. My favorite one is Squeaky Beach. And literally, as you walk across that beach, that white quartz sand will squeak beneath your feet. And you'll have the absolute privilege of seeing beautiful wildlife in the wild. You are bound to see wombats. They'll definitely come and visit you when you're cooking a barbie at night. Echidnas, kangaroos, emus, you name it, you'll see it. And also Kennecott Cruises has now brought in a new tour, which is a 2.5-hour cruise directly off Tidal River, off the beach there. And you can actually see the promontory from the sea, and you will get really close up, and I mean close up, to whales, dolphins, seals, great bird life. So that's another fantastic product that really should be included on itineraries. And lastly, further on towards the border of New South Wales, Lakes Entrance, that's one of the, well, it is the largest inland waterway, so a great place to just hire out a boat or a yacht, go out and just enjoy some of the absolutely stunning beaches, beautiful sunsets, and great seafood and food and wine. And probably one of the key highlights there would be to explore a little island called Raymond Island. You can only get to it by boat, but it's just a little 10 minutes free boat from Paynesville. And that's home to one of Victoria's largest koala reserves. You will absolutely guarantee get off that boat and you will see the koalas doing what they do best, which is just hanging out in the trees. So those are probably my 3 top picks.
Yeah, sweet. And what about for clients that are driving south, on the New South Wales side, Siobhan? Do you have anything to add for that?
Yeah, so I mean, Claire's obviously touched on some amazing wildlife experiences that you can do on the Victoria side, and of course you can totally continue that theme with your customers as you go into New South Wales. So there's some fantastic marine life experiences in particular for clients who want to stop off at Narooma, which is you cross the border over from Victoria, you can do on your way up towards Sydney. There's a fantastic island there called Montague Island, and customers that visit the island also have the opportunity to get in the water and swim with Australian fur seals. So it's a great way to get up close and personal with those guys. And further north from there, up in Jervis Bay, which is about 3.5 hours south of Sydney by car, that's another fantastic hotspot for marine wildlife. So there's dolphins that are resident in the bay year round. So if you head out with someone like Jervis Bay Wild Cruises, you can get out onto the water and go and seek out some of those playful dolphins. And also during the migration period for humpback whales up and down the east coast, which the best time sort of within New South Wales to do that would be between May and November. You can also take a guided tour from Jervis Bay to go and see some of those amazing humpback whales. And so I suppose just to touch on a few other great experiences that you can do on this route, the Shoalhaven wine region is also on the New South Wales south coast. So Claire touched a little bit on some of that food and wine and the seafood that's available in this region. The Shoalhaven region is fantastic because the vines actually grow so close to the ocean. So, you know, you can go from that amazing beach experience to a cellar door within a few moments and really be sampling some of that amazing Australian wine. And Cupid's Estate is one of my sort of top places to visit for that experience. They've also got their own dairy, so they make their own cheese. They also make their own beer. So you don't have to be into your wine, you just have to be into your local good food to enjoy that one. And also there's some great sort of glamping experiences along this route. Jervis Bay has there's a property there called Paper Bark Camp, which will certainly kind of complete your customer's experience, particularly if they perhaps want to spend one night outside of their motorhome, or if they're self-driving in a car, something a bit special, then that really immerses them in the Australian bushland. So a great way, again, to get a different perspective on that region.
Cool. Sounds brilliant. And Ali, am I right in thinking you've actually done this trip yourself? Do you have any personal highlights or tips for agents on how to sell that particular route?
Yeah, I think so I did this route recently, so just last year, and I think one of the biggest tips, so I'll just highlight how long it is. So you're looking at 22 to 24 hours driving between Sydney and Melbourne. So that's why I want to make sure that you recommend, at least a week doing the Sydney to Melbourne or Melbourne to Sydney touring route, just so that they can really make the most of these places. You don't want to spend the whole time driving. So, by breaking it up to kind of, a week, 6 nights, that's only, 3 to 4 hours a day driving. They can really, experience it and not remember it for, driving the whole time. I guess I just want to echo what these guys were saying in terms of the wildlife, because you just see so much wildlife. It is a lot less touristy on this route, so it's a bit more off the beaten track, and there's just so much Aussie wildlife that you can see, literally just, on the sides of the road, just next to the beach grazing, but also the marine life as well. So loads of marine life that you can see, and literally, kayaking, and it'll come straight up next to you, or like kangaroos grazing right next to the beach, like real quintessential Aussie experiences, and also incredible seafood. So if you've got any of your clients that love their seafood, it doesn't get much fresher than this region of Australia. They actually shuck oysters right in front of you, and you can eat them fresh, and they're just delicious. So that's another good tip for those ones as well.
Cool. And obviously this is a really difficult time for our industry. Agents are going through a lot. How do you plan to support them in this difficult time? And are there any platforms that agents can use to learn more while they're kind of a bit quieter?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones, which I've mentioned before, is the Aussie Specialist Program. So that's just a really good resource. It's our online training platform, where they can go on if they find themselves with a bit extra time over the coming couple of weeks, then that's a great one to check out. We've got modules on both New South Wales and Victoria there, so they could delve a bit deeper into the regions, and there's also product videos as well, where they can get updates from the different products in the regions. And we're actually doing an incentive. I did mention it last week, but it's still going now, where if agents are just trainees or they're just signing up to it, if they qualify in the month of April, we're giving away some Australian chocolate hampers to help them get through isolation. So Tim Tams and Caramello Koalas and things. So if they haven't done it yet, if they manage to qualify in April, we're going to send out 20 or so of those to agents. So that's always great. And also check out those virtual tours as well. So that's a great way to get a taste of what the different regions have to offer. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And Claire, what about Visit Victoria?
Well, you can certainly go to our Facebook site, so Facebook.com/Visit Melbourne, or you'll also get an absolute myriad of information, great itinerary ideas, etc. if you go to visitmelbourne.com. I'd also really highly recommend going to Sydney Melbourne Touring. That's all one word, sydneymelbournetouring.com. And that will give you all of the combinations of both Shiv and I have talked about. And that's probably one of the best resource platforms for you. And also on that platform, as an agent, they run these amazing live webinars, live streams. So keep your eyes out peeled for those, because they'll be great for giving you some really extra tips and ideas about the route.
Okay, great. And what about Destination New South Wales, Siobhan?
Yeah, so of course, as Ali's touched on, we are obviously part of the Aussie Specialist Programme, so it's a great resource for those that want to do some more training. And we've also got our own Facebook page, which is trade facing as well. So if people go to facebook.com/destination NSW trade, that's all one word, then they'll be able to keep in touch with us and hear all of our latest updates about product news, any training opportunities, any for mill opportunities as well, once we get that going again. And also, of course, we're there and available to take answers to any questions that people have. So if they've got queries, they can contact us via the chat function or just leave us a message on the Facebook page and we'll be able to get back to them. So yeah, that's really the best way that they can keep in touch with us at the moment. And of course, for those that want sort of more consumer advice, then we've also got our consumer website, which is sydney.com. And there also is plenty of information there as well, obviously about the wider regions in New South Wales.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to finish by asking a question that agents might have in the coming months. What do you think will drive traffic initially when the borders do reopen? I mean, that can be, I don't know who wants to answer that. Maybe Ali?
Yeah. So I'll start off. I'm sure you guys have stuff to say. I think this is a strong market in terms of, I think a lot of people, particularly the Brits, there's a strong connection with that family and relative connection. Everyone's got kind of a friend or a family or relative down in Australia. But as well as, like I have mentioned this before, but that kind of comforting familiarity with Australia, where we share, such similar cultural ties. And I think that's a big draw card, especially after this uncertain period that we're all in at the moment, to have that kind of comforting familiarity and the great outdoors as well. I know that, I'm craving to be outside at the moment in a much indoor space where I am, outdoor space, sorry. So Australia is great for that. And I think that'll be a big draw card for them to get down under and experience the outdoors. What do you guys think, Claire and Siobhan?
Yeah, I agree. I think the visit friends and family market will be probably one of the ones to come back the quickest. And I think from a Melbourne and a Sydney perspective, we are blessed in the sense that we have great aviation capacity. And whilst it's a lot is on hold at the moment, I think you'll find that will come back. And I think our sporting events, as we've mentioned, we hope we'll have the T20 in October that will really kickstart the season again for us all. But if we don't, we've got the Ashes in the following year. So I think there are some great opportunities that will kickstart the market again for us when we're all ready to move on.
Yeah, and I hope that obviously if there's one thing that this situation has shown us, it's probably how much we all miss traveling, and and actually it can, that great thing that perhaps we've all taken for granted can be taken away from us. So perhaps this is that moment when people really will think about their wish list, those holidays they've always been meaning to take and not taking, which Australia often does fall into that category. And perhaps now's finally the time that people will think, what, let's do those big trips, let's go and finally see those big destinations that we've always wanted to see when they finally get the chance again. So who knows, maybe this is the best time really to inspire people to visit Australia.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity for agents to train up, isn't it, while they're a bit quieter or working from home or even furloughed. So I think that is it from us today. Agents, if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the comments section, and we will do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. And remember to tune in next Wednesday at 11 a.m. for our next instalment in the Destination Focused Tourism Australia Masterclasses. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.